Hello and welcome to another Battle Report series, talking Warhammer Renaissance and Moments of Consequence with Barrett and Jake. Tonight we bring you Jake and Casey. They are playing all the way up in Vermont using our streamlined setup rules that we have started to give to you guys in the community. Really great battle. It's crazy that they came up with the exact same deployment and scenario type. You know, with dice and statistics, it's bound to happen, but it was a pretty crazy anomaly that the dice produced a similar result. I'm going to leave this screen up and I will play it again at the end when Jake and Casey are discussing their battle, but if you want to look at it before the battle or if you want to come back to it, you can just pause the video real quick and you can take a look at their lists. Without further ado, Jake and Casey take the village.
Alrighty, we have 2,000 point take the village battle between Empire and a Blood Dragon Vampire Count's army. So we're doing we've got diagonal deployment. So we set up our map using the streamlined system, and this is what we ended up with. So Casey, let's go over your army.
Got a hero on a Pegasus, dwarf crossbowmen, dwarf warriors with heavy armor and shields, a great cannon, a halfling hot pot, a hellblaster peeking around the building, a unit of Reiksguard foot knights with a BSB and an Empire Lord, a level 3 light wizard, looks like an amethyst wizard, but it's a light wizard on a horse, halflings with a champion, outriders, halberdiers with a warrior priest, and a detachment of greatswords.
Okay, and on the vampire side, we've got some vampire knights, zombies with a wraith champion, and a level 4 necromancer with a spell familiar, a vampire lord and a unit of wights with shields, skeletons with halberds, wights with halberds, and ghouls. Okay, so we did undead. So actually Empire won the roll-off. Casey declined the first turn. And so here's what we got. The Vampire Knights moved up. These two units moved up their full 8 inches, facing off against the dwarves on this flank. These units kind of wheeled and started marching in this direction. And the ghouls entered the Great Hall. And that's it for turn 1, undead. Okay, so we just had Empire turn 1. So we're on this flank. Halberdiers are making their way towards the Great Hall, held by the ghouls. The Outriders and Halflings unloaded some shots on these wights and took out 5 of them. The General and BSB's unit moved into the stables. Hellblaster held its fire back. The Hot Pot shot very off target, and the cannon just took out 2 wights in this unit. The dwarf warriors moved into the cottage here, and then the big action was on this flank. This Pegasus hero has the berserker sword, so he had to charge the knights, and then the crossbowmen came in for support. Both the hero and the crossbowmen did a wound each, so they killed 1 vampire knight between the 2 of them. And then the vampire knights rolled pretty poorly and only killed a single dwarf. Luckily, one of the war horses also killed a dwarf, and it ended up being a tied combat. Okay, so we just had undead turn 2, top of the second. So the vampire knights prevailed, killed 4 dwarves, took no wounds in return, and ran down both the hero on the Pegasus, so-called hero, and dwarves. This unit moved towards this building, and then in the magic phase they were Van Helsed into the building, charging the building. I guess they're not inside it yet, but they've charged it. This unit moved up. These units moved up. And we had our first magic phase. Rolled a 4, so it was low winds of magic, but let's see, no other spells. Well, let's see, the Dwellers Below were cast on these skeletons. Killed about 10 of them. And then there's an attempted Bridge of Shadows using the Ring of Volans, but Dispel scrolled that. And there was an attempt to use the Chalice to cast Raise Dead, and that was dispelled. Alright, we just had Empire turn 2. Action-packed turn. So just starting on this flank where there's a little less action, the Halberdiers moved into the woods, going for that building slowly. Over here, the Outriders completely just did nothing. And meanwhile, the Halflings downed 6 whites. And the Wizard kind of repositioned on the hill. The Hellblaster had quite an interesting and powerful blast at the whites who are attacking this building. So we were a little unsure of what to do rules-wise. I mean, since this unit's in melee combat, but they're sort of with a unit with a unit in a building, we decided to make it so that it'd be 5+ it would hit the dwarves in the building. So it was like a greater chance of hitting the unit outside the building. And it ended up killing 6 dwarves and I think 11 whites. Very high rolls, only used, 4 barrels, and you got like 34 hits, so it was short range. So it was pretty, that house got lit up pretty hardcore. So in the magic phase, this unit Van Helsed forward, basically to hopefully take it out this turn. And Hands of Krakoa got cast on these whites. And wasn't there another successful? No, I guess everything else got dispelled. Yeah, those were the 2 that went through. Oh, yeah, and A Curse of Years was cast on the Empire unit in the building, and Casey used a scroll. Okay, so we just had Undead turn 3. So let's see. This unit of zombies charged the Hellblaster, took it out, overran. In here, the vampire and whites beat up the dwarves pretty bad, but they actually held. The vampire knights had a failed charge on the cannon. They were pretty close, but didn't quite make it. These skeletons ambled forward, and then the big phase was the magic phase. The Necromancer cast Gaze of Nagash on this guy who didn't have a dispel at all. So it went off, but only did a wound on him, and then he unleashed a Dwellers Below with total power on the zombies and Necromancer. It killed the Necromancer Lord, it killed the Wraith, and half the zombies, so a huge moment of consequence in this battle. The Necromancer, despite beating death for decades and even centuries, he is now below ground. He'll probably be back, but not anytime soon. Okay, so we just had Empire turn 3. So the dwarves were wiped out to 1 dwarf who ran. The cannon misfired to take an aim at the vampire knights. The hot pot is just shot wildly off target every single time. The wizard cast Crevasse, and all but 3 zombies fell into the crevasse. And maybe just a white or 2 was killed from shooting, and these units moved. That's it. Okay, so we just had Undead turn 4. The vampire knights charged and wiped out the artillery on the hill. The zombies turned to threaten the halflings. The vampire is looking to moved out of the building, leaving his regiment of whites behind. The skeleton halberdiers finally decided to enter this cottage and claim the objective there. These guys are still trapped. Nothing happened in the magic phase, and that's it. Okay, we just had Empire turn 4. So the big thing was these Reichsguard moved out of this building. cleverly forming into a long column so they could move farther, because you place the back of the unit against the building and then move. That's why they're like that. So the vampire's right next to him. They just marched right past a vampire lord. That is a lot of gall. And then the BSB decided to stay behind. Not quite sure why. Just the turn before, we remembered that banners don't work in buildings, so we assume that means BSBs don't work. So who knows what Casey's up to, but then he moved his greatswords in as well. Greatsword detachment. Over here, the halberdiers attacked this building being held by the ghouls, and they got repulsed. They found out that without their halberds, they are no match for nasty ghouls, and lost the combat by 2. Managed to not flee, but just bumped back from the building. In the magic phase, crevasse got cast on this building, still represented here by this crevasse. So we were actually looking at the wording, and it was a little bit unclear because it said that a building more than half under the template is destroyed on a 4+, but no building would be like more than half covered by this template. So we interpreted it to mean that if, I don't know, we're not too clear on it, but we
more than half of the template.
More than half of the template, but since you get to place the template,
yeah,
it's just sort of it didn't seem quite right to us, so we did allow that it would destroy the building on a 4+. Casey rolled a 1, so just a few skellies fell in, and the building stands. Other than that, anything else? Let's see. The halfling champion shot down a vampire knight, adding that to his impressive record of success. That's it. Okay, just had undead turn 5. It was a pretty consequential turn. So we had a bunch of charges. The whites charged this wizard who was sitting right here under the eaves of the stables, and they had that spell immobilizing them on them for like the whole game. And I think the wizard just inched up a little too far, didn't think they were moving, and they were just... Casey decided to hold against the charge because it looked really close, but they were in by about a 1/4 inch. And then he failed his fear check and rolled an 18 for his flee. So he ran right off the table at top speed and is gone. So that was a big, brutal moment. Here, the vampire knights, the remaining 2, and the remaining 3 zombies charged the halflings. They won the combat by 4, but those stout little halflings held. Over here, the vampire charged the Reichsguard who tried to walk right past him in the flank, challenged the general to challenged and fought the general in single combat and killed him, tied combat. And there was no magic phase to speak of since there's no wizards left. So we just had Empire turn 5. So let's see. The halberdiers once again charged the Great Hall and were repelled by the ghouls, but this time their nerve broke and they fled. The vampire knights and zombies broke the halflings and then pursued and then into the halberdiers and caused them to flee again. The vampire killed 7 Reichsguard knights, and that was enough for them. They ran away. He did not quite catch them. And we did roll to have a turn 6. All right, so we just did turn 6 very quickly. So basically the vampire charged the Reichsguard. They had to flee into the building, so were destroyed. You would have caught them anyway. The halberdiers fled, did not rally, and ran off the edge of the board. The whites charged the stables, and these guys failed their fear check and fled out the back door, did rally. So at the end of the battle, the undead hold all of the buildings, and Casey said it was an awful end to the battle. And yeah, it was a pretty good game. It was pretty close. up until kind of the things took a bad turn at the end. So that is the game. All right, so I'm post game with Casey. We're just sitting on the couch thinking about what happened. Casey's drowning his sorrows.
Yep.
In a method of his choosing. And we had Take the Village, obviously, and we kind of each had 2 buildings on our side. So I kind of had 2. I had the ghouls go in one, and eventually I had the skeletons go in the other. And then Casey had the dwarf warriors take the one on the flank and put his main Reichsguard unit in the one in his deployment zone. So that was kind of it basically was a matter of like who's going to take what. He went after the one with the ghouls in it with his halberdiers. I went after the one on the other flank. So yeah, the game it kind of started out.
Yeah, it kind of started with swinging in Jake's favor, where his Vampire Knights broke my crossbowmen and my Pegasus hero, and then we're kind of coming down that flank. His whites were also attacking and winning against my dwarves in the building on that side.
With the Vampire Lord.
Yeah, with the Vampire Lord. And then also his Necromancer's unit, Van Horseman's, then took out the Hellblaster and overran. So that flank was kind of a disaster. But then...
Yeah, so that was kind of like the height of like... The initial swing was in my favor, and that was kind of like the peak of the swing, and then...
Yeah, and then, so things kind of turned in my favor when I was able to use total power to kill his Necromancer and half that unit. And I kind of, for a turn and a half, maybe I had control of the magic phase and felt like things were kind of going my way and I could see a path to victory. But then things started to go.
Yeah, because like for that phase, like the vampire was kind of just like stuck in that building with the dwarves for like a few combat phases. The whites were like locked down. The white halberdiers on the other flank were kind of locked down. You were advancing on the building with the ghouls. You were shooting stuff up.
Yeah.
It sort of felt like you were kind of confidently sort of holding your ground and like making some progress on whittling me down. And like, yeah, you had a wizard and I had no wizard. So that was looking good.
Then there were a couple big shifts. So one was that my halberdiers finally came to grips with the ghouls in the building, and it did not go well.
Dude, the ghouls were your bane.
They were definitely my bane. So they repelled the halberdiers twice. The second time, they fled away from the building full of ghouls. So that was terrible. And then the other piece there were like 2 other pieces that shifted there. One was that your vampire came out of the building and started wreaking havoc and like really controlled space, and then ended up killing my main unit.
Yeah, he just killed the whole unit with his whole unit of Reichsguard. Just like brutal.
And then the other thing was that I like stupidly had kind of I got complacent with your unit of white halberdiers on the other side.
Oh yeah,
kind of being stuck. And
they were immobilized for half the battle.
I just like wasn't paying attention, and I moved my wizard a little bit too close, so then when he dispelled the hands of Karkora, he was able to just charge my wizard, which was another disaster. So like 3 disasters
and that was like
and
that was within a quarter inch, so that was a rough one. I actually didn't think they were in range. I thought it was like a maybe, but
yeah,
they were.
So it ended up just, kind of in the last 2 turns, the bottom fell out and the empire crumbled.
And then since your general first was far away and then got killed, then your leadership was also
my
really
leadership
low.
bubble got ruined.
So you had stuff, just stuff that got...
Yeah. So basically, like, I think my takeaways from that battle were, I think I really... I did think about the dynamics of fighting in buildings, but I really didn't think hard enough about it, and I think I misevaluated how certain combats within buildings were going to play out. Like, for instance, the biggest
thing was to basically a failure to recognize that the halberdiers were actually disadvantaged against these 10 ghouls. It's like giant unit of halberdiers with the phalanx banner and warrior priest just like got, you know, totally destroyed by 10 ghouls in a building. So that was like a misevaluation. And then also just some of the dynamics of like turn by turn what's going to happen when you have to like move out of a building and then try and go threaten another building or something like that. And also just having a character that's good at fighting in a unit in a building is so valuable. And I really like didn't have that other than my Reichsguard unit, which never got in combat in a building.
Yeah, I think looking back, I think putting your Reichsguard in a building that was like back in your deployment zone meant that your best unit wasn't actually like in action for a lot of the battle. Like they were sitting back inactive basically.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had pressed forward, you know, I wouldn't have been able to like, I mean, I might have been able to sneak around to that building somehow, but I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like it kind of is like I think my strategy that I think did end up working was I put like weaker units in the buildings on my side and then moved up my stronger stuff. And eventually that did basically work.
Yeah. I think I wanted to you basically expand the leadership bubble of your general by putting him in a building.
Yeah.
Which
it's kind of weird.
Kind of nice where I felt by having him in the building, it really did kind of provide most of my army with his leadership.
Yeah.
But I could have actually left him in the building with it, you know, the detachment of great swords or something like that.
Yeah.
And moved the unit of Reichsguard with the BSB out and started working with them in the middle of the battlefield. But I didn't really think of it like that at the time.
It does. I do think like the buildings being so different, like almost should like be a prompt to be thinking like, okay, I had this army designed in a certain way, assuming open a battle on a battlefield. But now that I know it's in buildings, it almost like prompts you to reevaluate like everything you had planned and like, well, okay, I thought I wanted my general in this unit, but actually, like maybe it makes sense to put him in a totally different unit. And like one of the things that is a big game changer is the fact that banners don't work in buildings. Yeah. And so we realized that with the BSB. Casey had his BSB in the building, and at a certain point we realized like, oh, I guess that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I had my unit of zombies had the banner of spell protection, and that was one of the reasons I didn't put my necromancer in a building, because I like wanted the spell protection, which in the end didn't really matter because he got killed by a total power. But it was it was like a consideration based on just the. But I was like, well, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it just sort of prompted reflection, reevaluation of what I had in my list and like what made most sense to do on the battlefield.
Yeah, both of us actually had units that were good in buildings. I think you had units that were probably a bit better, like your army was a little more suited. But my army, I mean, I had good units. I took kind of an interesting list that's different from how I usually take the Empire, where probably most often I take kind of a balanced list that does a bunch of different things. But in this case, my only cavalry was the Outriders, which ended up being terrible.
Do you have anything you want to say about Outriders?
I don't think I'll ever take them again. Like, I kind of think there should be some adjustment to how they function. Like maybe just
they're so bad that you've taken them a handful of times and they absolutely are just laughably bad.
I kind of think like the fix would be like an increase in points, like a substantial increase in points and ballistic skill 4. Because then otherwise they basically function the same. They're just a little bit better, cost a little bit more points. But anyways, yeah, they were terrible. So I took like kind of a infantry heavy semi-gun line list that I imagined being very defensive, which definitely had some pros and cons with the scenario, and the setup being like slanted was a little bit funky for that too, like the combination of that. kind of made my
And the buildings
my game
really,
plan
and
not
the buildings
make
really
sense.
break up the battlefield.
Yeah, yeah,
In a way that's like sort of surprising when you're expecting a more open field.
yeah.
So
So yeah, no, it was a good battle. It ended quite horribly for me. But
Yeah.
it was a good battle. It was a good time.
it definitely had some exciting moments and some. It had a trajectory. It definitely like kind of went through some phases, and so yeah, good game, Casey.
Yeah, good game.